Welcome back to an amazing Tanya show at the end of Perek Gimel Tanya, and we're going to be talking about the Indian of Das. What is Das? Das is the third of our three C's. Remember, Chokhmah is conception. It's a part of your mind that comes up with ideas, the light bulb moment. Bina is understanding. It takes the light bulb moment and transforms it in what we call in the three C's, contemplation. It brings out all the details of the ideas, every single nitty gritty. And then you have the third C. But why do you need a third C? If you came up with an idea, let's say you wanted to build a house, and then you thought of all the details. You're like, okay, I'm going to build 3 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, and I'm going to have a porch and a landing. The house is going to be in a beautiful area in the Bronx. And now, what do you need more in your mind? Your mind's full. Your intellect has come to the depth of the idea. Now we're talking about Das, which is the third C, which is connection, which is connecting your idea to your heart, to your feelings. And this is so important. And this is going to explain the complaint of every Bocher I've ever taught. And every Bocher I've ever taught has said at some point, I learned this already. Why do we need to learn it again? And the answer is, if you learned it already and you're not learning it again, you're missing the whole point. Because when you learn something once, I'll tell you something crazy. It says in the Kuntres Eitz HaChaim, the Rebbe Rashab writes in the handbook for Bochum of Tanya Chapter. It's very geschmack. The handbook for Bochum of Tanya Chapter. You would think it would say like how many times you should brush your teeth every day. Instead, the handbook is a mimer about Yichud Elo and Yichud Dato. That's a pretty good handbook for Tanya Chapter. So it says in there that to understand something you learn, just to understand it, nothing like deep about this. To understand something you learn, you have to learn it 2 or 3 times. Which is a fascinating idea. You think you learn something once, you close the safer, and you move on. Very nice. Yeah. No. To understand something, you have to learn it 2 or 3 times. I'll tell you why. The first time you learn something, guys, you're only figuring out the skeleton, the structure. You're like, okay, you're dealing with every single idea in the mimer. Let's say you're learning a mimer, a piece of Gemara, or a Talmudic thesis. Every point, every chapter, you're trying to figure out that chapter and each point in the chapter. When you finish learning, you have a whole bunch of puzzle pieces you figured out. The second time, some people it takes once or twice to get that. And then the second or the third time you learn it, you put all those puzzle pieces together. You take the skeleton and you see how it's a full body. You take all these different ideas, and from that, you figure out how it's a full thesis, how it's a full piece of Gemara, how there's a flow, how there's a message. So you have to understand something, basic understanding. If you want to get 100 on the test, you have to learn something 2 or 3 times. Now, after you've learned something 2 or 3 times, with your Chokhmah and your Bina, so you came up with the idea, the first time you learned it, you had like the Chokhmah, you had the basic idea. The second and third time you learned, you got the Bina, you got all the details. Now is when the real learning starts. Now is Das. Now when you keep going over it, and whacking away, and learning over and over and over, now you really get down and dirty to get the idea down into your mind to affect you. There's a mashpir, Nissen Nemenov, who used to say that when we say Pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the dalad at the end by Echad, it's a big, thick dalad. You look in any siddur, they put the dalad in thick. And he said, why do you have the dalad in thick? Now everyone knows the basic answer, so you don't confuse it with a resh. And he said there's a big dalad because the letter dalad in Hebrew, it's shaped like a hammer. And it's telling you, you have to knock it into your head, Hashem Echad, that there's one Hashem. You have to knock it into your head. You have to knock it in. You have to get it over and over. There was one time, Friedrich Rebbe was told by the Rebbe Rashab, I believe, that you should learn a certain mimer 60 times over. So he sat down and he did as he was told. He learned the mimer over and over and over and over 60 times. You know what it means to learn 60 times? Trust me, the mimer wasn't one paragraph. Would have taken him hundreds of hours to learn over and over and over. And you understand? It's not just reading the words. This is the Friedrich Rebbe, someone who really understands what he's learning. So someone came over and asked him, tell me, what was the big difference of the 59th time you learned it and the 60th time you learned it? Like, come on. You already learned it 59 times. One more time. What big difference was there? He said the difference between the 59th time and the 60th time was more of a difference than between the 59th time and the first time. You're saying that learning it more and deeper and better had more of an effect on him than the others because it's not about knowing the information. Even though in Torah everything is infinite depth and you could always learn better and deeper and more, even if you know it, even the level of Torah that you know, now, once you know it, now concentrating on it, connecting to the idea, brings it down into your heart, into your feelings. That's why Das traditionally means understanding, but the Alter Rebbe brings from the Torah, it says, Adam Yodeh Chava, Adam connected to Chava. that das can mean connection. And in Chassidus, whenever we say das, it means connection. It's connecting. Das Elyon is a different conversation for a different day. But basic das is connecting your mind to your feelings. And this is very important to do, especially if you're a big psychologist, because there was a man named Sigmund Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud is known as the father of modern psychology. He was an incredible thinker, a psychologist, and a great koifer, and had many, many negative ideas that you should not follow. But, what? Yes, he was very Jewish, of course. So, he had lots of ideas about life, and he is called the father of modern psychology because most schools of psychology nowadays, until this day, are still reverberate with his thought and his ideals. And it's quite rare that you find someone who's a bit of a rogue and follows the path of like Frankl or maybe even Jung. But most people go after either straight after Freud or after his greatest students, such as Adler, who has a different twist, but it's within the same realm. So you had this great psychologist, Frankl. His name was Sigmund Freud, the greatest of his day. And the Rebbe Rashab went to visit him. And he had an appointment. The Rebbe Rashab had an appointment, an unbelievable occurrence. Why this happened? Perhaps it was one of these big moments when the greatest mind of Torah and the greatest mind of modern science had to meet. Perhaps that's the reason. Officially, the reason was that the Rebbe Rashab was depressed. But it doesn't make sense because a Rebbe is not a regular person. Depression comes from a lack. Depression comes from emptiness. You can't say a Rebbe is empty. A Rebbe is full of godliness and likus and Torah and thinking. So it must have been that it's one of these moments that they would needed to have this, the world of Torah and the world of modern science collide. So they're sitting down talking, and Sigmund Freud is very impressed. He has a very intelligent client here, a man who's the head of an entire philosophy of Chabad Chassidus. So he says, Rabbi, can you tell me, in a nutshell, what is your philosophy? So the Rebbe Rashab says, you ready to hear what Chassidus Chabad is in one sentence? Someone who follows me online messaged me today. What is it that you do? What is this? That's a good question. What is Chassidus? It's a great question. So the Rebbe Rashab told him, my philosophy is that the mind should control the heart. Sure. You want to know what Chabad is? The mind should control the heart. Wow. So that sounds very simple. I'm like, yeah, sure, my mind controls my heart all the time until I see a nice bottle of Arizona mango madness with 16 ounces of high fructose corn syrup. I'm like, ooh, now my mind goes out the window. I'm like, I'm supposed to be on a diet, but I could really do with a cup of that. Then let's see how much the mind controls the heart. You know what I'm saying? So Sigmund Freud was shocked. He's like, the mind should control the heart? Now, he was a deep thinker, and he thought about the mind and the heart all day. And he said, aren't the mind and the heart two vast continents separated by a massive sea? Meaning to say, the mind and the heart are two different worlds as far as Sigmund Freud was concerned. In the morning, from 9 to 5, you're supposed to be a deep thinker and intellectual and do your business. You know, that's what he does. 9 to 5 is seeing clients and is thinking about humankind and is writing his books and teaching his students. And then after 5 o'clock, you go home and you party. You party. 9 to 5, you have the mind in charge. And late at night, you have the heart in charge. You go and eat some donuts and do whatever you feel like. Go party. Get drunk. Whatever you want. So the Rebbe Rashab said, it's true. The mind and heart are separate, completely separate. But you have to build a bridge, or at least spread telephone wires across the sea to connect them. This was in an era around the time when there was a big advancement in technology. Some short time before that they put a wire for telegraphs across the Atlantic Ocean, connecting Europe and America. So all of a sudden, instead of taking a month or a few weeks to take a letter by ship from Europe to America, now you can send a telegraph and it'll get there in a minute. So the Rebbe Rashab was learning from this, like the Baal Shem Tov says, that every occurrence you have to learn from, that you have to bridge the mind and the heart. And that takes hard work. Sigmund Freud is right. It doesn't happen naturally. Deep down, a person has the ability to do this naturally, but it doesn't just happen like that. If you're just going to sit back and like, I'll do whatever I feel like. Sometimes you feel like being intelligent, making smart decisions, and sometimes you feel like following your heart. And the heart sometimes has good things that it follows, and sometimes not good things. The Rebbe Rashab was teaching him you have to work, you have to build, you have to make the bridge between them. And that's done through das, through deep concentration. Like the Alter Rebbe says in this part of Tanya, that when you learn a subject, you have to think about it, concentrate on it. Don't be diverted. Do not have your undivided attention on it. And then you really drill it into your mind deeper and deeper until you start to feel it. Now, this is so important Because remember we spoke about Aristotle? Aristotle was an unbelievable philosopher, one of the great Greek philosophers. And he had a bit of a problem. His students caught him doing some very immoral behavior, doing some very bad stuff, very lowly, animalistic actions. And they're like, Aristotle, the sage, our teacher, you're such an intellectual, thoughtful, deep sage. You're the wisest of men. How can you fall down to acting like an animal? And he said Aristotle, the thinker, and Aristotle, the man, are two different people. As far as he was concerned, the mind and the heart are two different stories. As opposed to the Rebbeim are telling us, maybe there could be two different stories, but you have to build a bridge and connect them, put them together. You can make your mind control your heart. So, in Tanya until now, in fact, we're talking about when you think about Hashem, let's talk about feelings, how they're affected by the mind. So first, you think about Hashem, because we're not talking about Nefesh Elokis. She's like, wow, Hashem's so amazing. That's with your Chochmah. You come up with the idea. Hashem's incredible. Hashem created the whole world. Then with your Bina, you think of the details. If Hashem made the whole world and made me and cares enough about me to be involved, to be creating me at every moment, he must love me so much. Then that causes emotions. Firstly, the fear of heights that we're talking about. Like, whoa, Hashem is everything. Hashem's so great. I'm just the tiniest thing. Wow, that's incredible. And then it causes love. It's like, even though I'm the tiniest thing, Hashem chose me to love me. It causes love for Hashem. But those are wispy, fake, skinny, unviable emotions. Those emotions that are born by Chochmah and Bina, we call the intellect, the three mothers. Chochmah and Bina gives birth to children, emotions that are going to pass away very young. They don't have the nutrients. They don't have the health to be able to survive infancy. Through Das, through deeply connecting to the concept, to the point that it becomes part of who you are, then your emotions last and continue. And as opposed to what the Alter Rebbe says, that if you don't have Das, then they just dimyonis shov, false fantasies. You're like sitting there, you're involved in learning that morning, you're like, wow, Hashem's so amazing, I love Hashem. That's great that you're saying you love Hashem, but do you really deep down love Hashem? Are you still going to love Hashem when you're walking down the street and you see the most delicious, incredible, juicy donut with pink frosting? Or whatever your donut is in your life? When you have Das and you drill that in and make it part of your life, then it's really who you are. I just want to finish up with one story. There's a chassid who was told by his Rebbe, I believe it was Rebbe Marash, to learn a certain mimer 400 times. You know what it means 400 times? This chassid realizes if he starts pushing it off, if he starts doing a bit here, a bit there, he's never going to get it done. So he rented a hotel room, locked himself in with some food, and he sat there and learned the mimer 400 times. And only when he was done that, he checked out of the hotel. He said he walked down the street, all he could see in front of him was the words of the mimer. His whole life was just about this mimer. The message of the mimer became who he was. So whether you should learn the mimer 400 times or maybe try to learn it 2 times, and learn it once. Let me just give you one piece of advice when learning. The worst thing you could do is bury what you learn. You have some guys get up, 11 o'clock, it's time to learn Gemara. They're learning Gemara for 3 hours straight. At 2 o'clock, it's time to stop learning and daven. His 3 hours of learning, he shuts the top of the sefer, shuts the top of the casket, buries his learning. And he can't remember what he was learning about 5 minutes later. Someone's like, hey, what do you learn about today? You're like, stuff, Gemara, tell you. If you spend 30 seconds every Seder, when you finish learning, spend 30 seconds, end learning 30 seconds early, and think over what I learned today. Think, okay, what did I learn today? We had a question on this pasuk. We had an answer. We had a bit of a machlokes. There was these 2 opinions, and we resolved it like this. 30 seconds. Just think over a small summary. That's the das. That's drilling over what you thought already. That's knocking it into your head. I'm telling you, it'll change your life. Not only will you know it better, remember it better, your learning will start to affect you.